All right, so this week we pick up with Shemot chapter 33, verse 13. Just to kind of back up a little bit, remember, we've already found out that Moshe said, if I found any grace in your eyes, will you do this? And the answer was no. They said, if I found any grace in your eyes, will you do that? And the answer was no. Here we go again. This is the translation in literal English. And now, if now, find me grace in eyes you. He hasn't found any grace yet, but he's going to keep on trying, right? Because the last time God did finally say the children of Yisrael had found grace, but not Moshe in particular. And if you're just coming in hearing this for the first time and haven't heard the other two, you might want to back up the last few verses and listen to that. Because he asked, if I've received mercy, will you do this, that, and the other? And the answer was no every time. All right, so here he's asking once again. And now, if now, find me grace in eyes you, make known me now, weigh you, and I will know you, because I will find grace in eyes you, and look for people you, the nation, the this. So you see he's changing it up a little bit. He's saying, if I found any grace, will you show me your ways? And if you show me your ways, surely I can find some grace, right? That's a pretty good sum up for it. Well, here we go. Let's go through the words. Ve'ata, which is, and now, im, that's your if. It's used for lo, behold, truly, certainly, but it's a demonstrative, it's an interrogative, it's a conditional particle. So we say if in English. Nah, well, there's your Hebrew word for now. Mat zati, find me. If I have found, if I have come to, if I have attained to, if I have arrived at what? Well, you all know, chen, grace. If I have attained any grace. If I have arrived to a place in my life where I have somehow found grace, found favor, the enecha, in eyes you. So in your eyes is how we would say it. In eyes you is actually the right way to say it. Americans say everything wrong because pretty much everybody else in the world says it the other way. So you have to say, yeah, we're the only ones right and everybody else is wrong. Come on now. You know your mama told you better than that. All right, so it's the eyes. So if I found any grace, if I have obtained to it some way and somehow, well, what's he done since the last time he asked? Not really anything. I'm just saying. Hold the ani, make know me. So make me know. It's to perceive, to acquire knowledge, to be acquainted with. The signification both of seeing and knowing, to know, to perceive, to be aware of, whether by the eyes, by the touch, often by the mind, hence to understand, to get to know, to discover. It's like being on your first date and saying, I want to know everything there is about you, and then 30 years later laughing about it, saying, man, we couldn't keep our hands off each other back in those days. It's all of that rolled up into one thing here. So then it says na, which is your word for now, et derachecha. So it's your ways. This derech is your word, but this is the way of you. It's an action of going, a walking on a journey, the journey that one takes, but it's a path in which one goes. It is, to put it plainly, the totality of the way you live your life. So Moshe is saying, show me how you live your life. Show me what makes you tick. See, we're staying on this same theme. We're staying on this same idea. I want to know everything there is to know about you. But just to point something out, back in chapter 32, in verse 8, you remember it said they have turned quickly out of the way, haderech. It's the same word. It's the Torah, the covenant that the children of Yisrael had just entered into. They had turned quickly from it. So he's not just asking, show me how you live your life. He's asking, show me how to truly understand the Torah, because the Torah is the way that God lives his life. It is why the Torah is called the grace of God. It is why the Torah is called the Spirit of God. Yes, the Spirit of God is the Torah, because for several reasons. It's always several reasons if you think about it. But what is spirit? What is ruach? Because that's the word. What is that? That is the air that you breathe in and you breathe out, right? So you breathe in this air. And then when this air flows back through your lungs, then it comes out across your vocal cords, and you say, you will not commit murder. You will not steal. You will not covet your neighbor's stuff. That spirit becomes word. In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God. The word was God, right? Because how can you say the word was God? He's the one speaking the word, right? Remember how we used to look at it? My word is my bond. If I say it, it's a promise. All of that came from God, because God was the one who taught us that when you say something to another person like, yeah, I'll be there 15 minutes early, you have just made an oath with God. You have just swore before the God Almighty that you're going to be there 15 minutes early. So when you start telling yourself, it's not that important. Oh, he'll understand. Oh, it's no big deal. I really need to stop and get this latte. You've broken your covenant with God. I didn't make any promises. No, that's not how it works in God's world. The way God lives is according to the Torah. The Torah says when you say something, you've made a promise to God. You've sworn an oath. So your word is your bond. That's how John, the rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he's the one that said that. And because he was trying to get you to see if God said it, it's going to happen. If God said it did happen, it did happen. If he said it's happening now, it is happening now. If he said it's happening in the future, it will happen in the future. So his word is his bond. He is his word. So those words, they came from the very depths of him. It came from as deep inside of him as anything's going to come, right? And it goes through his lungs and it goes across his, and Unkelos would really have a problem with someone like me talking this way, but you got to see it this way. This is the only way that we can understand it in human terms. So his word is his spirit. His spirit is not some third God floating around whispering stuff into people's ears. His word is called the Torah. It is called the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim. We call it now the Tanakh because it's just that acronym. Is that what you call it? The T, the sound, the T sound, that's Torah. The N sound, nach, that N sound is Nevi'im, and at the end is the Ketuvim, right? So that's right. Is it an acronym? All right. So it's an acronym, but that's what we call it, and that's what Yochanan ben Zakkai called the scriptures. He said all scripture is the Spirit of God, the Ruach of God. It's what makes him tick. It is the way he lives his life. It is the totality of who he is, the Torah. Only he took it further. Because up until then, everybody was just saying that they were saying the Torah was. But what got lost over time was when they talked about the Torah, say in the 2nd century and before, they were talking about what we now call the Tanakh. They called the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, the Tanakh, they called all of that the Torah from the 2000s and before. From the 2000s this way, it began to break down, or 2000s. Where'd that come from? 2,000 years ago. The 1st century, the Second Temple period somehow became 2000s. From the Second Temple period, some of them were still calling the whole book the Torah. But others were beginning to split it up and call it the law and the prophets, if you will, the Torah, the Nevi'im, right? And then others began later on to say the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim, right? So eventually that became the acronym. But a couple thousand years ago, the whole thing was called the Torah. So we need to know that when he says all scripture, this is written in a time when, sorry Christians, but this is written in a time when there was no New Testament. So it is not possible that the man who said that was talking about the New Testament. He was not calling the New Testament scripture because it did not exist in his lifetime. It did not. There was no New Testament as we know it today. And let me put it this way. As we know the New Testament today, the books that are in there, that wasn't even suggested that those be the books, the final tally for what they call their canon. That wasn't even suggested until 390. 390, I'm going to say it this way, AD, for those of you who don't know the political correct way of saying CE, because it bothers some people when you say AD for some reason. But, and I'm Jewish and I don't even get it. But anyway, and it's for Jewish sensibilities more than anything. Jewish and atheist, by the way. I don't get the atheist part at all. Jewish, I don't understand either. But anyway, AD. So you're talking, look how many hundreds of years later before they even suggest that the books we now know as the New Testament should be called the New Testament. Those should be the books that they put in what will eventually be called the New Testament. Almost 400 years after the fact. So that was not called scripture. And to call it scripture now is in error. Nobody ever indicated that what's in the New Testament should be considered scripture. Nobody. That's a Christian thing that did not exist, couldn't possibly have existed until the 500s or 600s at the very earliest. And then it would have been a Catholic thing because Christianity did not exist until the 1500s AD. Are you following? There was no Christianity until the 1500s when it was founded and broke off from the Catholicism. Up until then, you only had Catholicism as far as this Christianity sort of stuff goes. And Catholicism didn't exist, literally didn't even have a name until the mid to late 400s AD. They didn't have a name. The reason why they settled on it is because in the 300s, when Constantine won his war, he gets together with guys like Jerome and Eusebius and people like that. And these guys are philosophers. They're not Christians. There are no Christians. They're not Catholics. There are no Catholics. These men are not Jewish rabbim. Because that's all you had up until then was the Jewish religion. And then these guys come along in the 100 to 200 years. If you push it really hard and basically hold your lip right, you can push it back 200 years. But in that time period, you had this group of guys that were called philosophers. In the time of Eusebius, I have his books right there beside me. When he wrote his church history, his biggest complaint was there were people out there that were not philosophers trying to philosophize the New Testament letters. Plus, that same man said that the second book of Peter shouldn't be a part of the canon because they were talking about it at that point. Because this was the mid-300s, so they were talking about it by then. But what they were doing was developing a new religion. And they were not developing something that was built off of what Jesus did. That guy still didn't exist in the 300s. They had a guy named Yeshua, who they couldn't even pronounce his name right because they didn't have an SH sound in their language. So they called him Yesu, Jesus usually, because they couldn't have an A sound at the end of a name because then that becomes a woman. They couldn't have their Messiah, their God, being a woman, so they put an S at the end of his name. So he went from being Yeshua to Yesua to Jesus. You follow where Jesus came from? If you take a Y and replace it with a J, what do you get? Jesus, which slurs to Jesus. But anyhow, I got way off on this other path. I don't even remember why.
Talk about the way.
The way was the Torah. It was later seen as, or should have always been seen by Judaism as the Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim, what we call the Tanakh. What 2,000 years ago was simply called the Torah. We now split them up, and we call the first 5 books the Torah. But 2,000 years ago and before, the whole thing was called the Torah. Yes, it was. The evidence is abundant. Anyway, so let's talk about the way that they turned from, right? This is the way that God lives his life. That's why we call it his spirit. 1, it came out of him. It went across his vocal cords. He spoke it his words. But it's what, 2, it's what makes him tick. 3, it is God's lifestyle. What greater gift could God give to mankind who's born into this world of darkness? It doesn't seem dark to us because, if you're born blind, you don't see the world as dark. How could you? You don't know what dark or light is. So if we're born into a world that is considered by God to be a world in darkness, the darkness is the not knowing the right way to go, the right way to navigate this world. And what greater gift of grace could God give to us than say to us, hey, you know what? You don't have to live by my rules. No. What did he give us? A bunch of rules we have to live by and that crush us down and make us feel bad? No. He said, this is how I live my life. I don't murderize. I don't kill women and children. I don't steal from people. I don't lie to people. I don't do all these things. And you know what? If you'll do those things, if you'll live the way I live, you'll navigate through this world just fine. Now, there'll be a lot of people who don't live that way, but if you'll live that way, you'll get through this world. There'll be ups and downs. There'll be heartaches. The good and the bad comes together in God's world. He created it that way, and he called it perfect. So for the Gnostics to come along and say, oh, you know what? There's bad stuff in this world. People die, and it's so sad, especially when babies die. They blame God. No. The number one goal of every human being from the moment they're born is to die. That's the number one goal of your body. It's trying to kill you from the moment you take your first breath. And I think it may be trying to kill you from the moment you're conceived. I'm not sure. But your body, its number one goal is to end its life. Some of us live longer than others, but that's still the number one goal of our body. So maybe we were designed to get somewhere else, right? Because that was part of God's perfect design, was that this body eventually die, and the spirit that's within it goes somewhere else, right? That's what we believe, isn't it? That's the whole going to heaven thing. Just want you to know what the Spirit of God is. It's not the third person of the Trinity. That's the perversion, the Catholic and eventually Christian perversion of what God's Spirit is. God's Spirit is his law. And it's every part of the Tanakh. Everything in there is God's lifestyle. It's based on God's lifestyle. It's based on what makes God tick. And if we can learn to live that way, we can find peace in a life that had never known peace. Will it make everything perfect? No, because the world, as far as we're concerned, is not perfect. God sees it as perfect. Death is not a terrible thing. It's the ultimate goal. It's the thing that we should be looking forward to. At some reason, we've turned it into something completely upside down. It's the worst thing that could possibly happen. But it's actually the beginning of life. It's the beginning of what's real life. And so when we see all these things as bad, there's always good somewhere in it. It always leads to something good. Anyway, now evil's a different story. Let's not mix the things that are supposed to happen, like death, with evil, which would be murder. Murder's not supposed to happen. But it does, because not everybody lives by God's way. If we all live by God's way, there would be no problems. Just saying. Our next word, ve'eda'aha, and I will know you. So If you'll make me understand that Torah, I will know you. Don't you understand? That's the whole point of learning the Torah, is that's how you get to know God, right? It started off with, I want to know everything about you. I want to start off like on that first date where you're both telling every story you know to tell about yourself and about your growing up and about blah, 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 and telling each other what you believe, to the looking back all those years later and and giggling about how you couldn't stop looking at, I couldn't take my eyes off of Donna. I couldn't do it. All of that's happening here. And he's saying, if I learn the Torah, this is what is going to happen to my relationship with God. See, what the world's done is they've perverted this whole thing. They try to have a relationship with God outside of the Torah, and it's impossible. You don't learn the stories. You don't learn what makes God tick. You don't learn what he believes and what he doesn't believe. You don't learn any of that stuff. Instead, you get it off of TV shows like the Ten Commandments, and you actually think that Pharaoh didn't drown with his army and went back to his kingdom and got browbeat by his wife for a while. You actually think that Moshe was the number one loved son of the Pharaoh, and that Moshe built the cities and all that. No, he didn't. Moshe, as his name actually was, he was a servant to a servant. He was not the number one loved son of the king. He did not speak the Egyptian language very well. It was his first language, because think about where he grew up. Hebrew would not have been his first language, just throwing that out there. His mother would never have dared to teach him Hebrew, because if he got caught speaking Hebrew, they'd get them both killed. So he didn't learn Hebrew. He learned Egyptian. And by the way, being a servant to a servant, because it was very obvious that he was Jewish. The Egyptians were black. They were from the black race. And the Jews were not. And they were much smaller in stature than the black race was. And that's a generalization. I'm sure there was a tall Jew here and there. But for the most part, the Jews were very short people. And they were brown. So it was very obvious that he was not Egyptian. He was not treated like an Egyptian. They knew who he was. They knew what his station was. He dressed his station. So his grasp on language was little more than what a dog would learn. Sit, stay, fetch. Those are the sort of things he would have known. So he was not an orator. He did not walk like a king. He did not talk like a king. He did not fight like a king. In fact, every time he was faced with any kind of conflict, he always fell down on his face and cried like a little girl. Read your book and you'd know that. It's nothing like the movies. Nothing. So, how do you get to know somebody when all you know is Hollywood? All you know is what Hollywood's you shouldn't love God because he lets little children die. Are you following what I'm saying? I know God and get to know that he is not a murderer, that he doesn't kill little kids and stuff like that, is to learn his Torah. And this is what Moshe's doing. He's saying, I want to know you in that way. And so if you'll teach me, if you'll make me truly understand the Torah, then I'm truly going to know you. I'm going to truly perceive you. I will have seen you, seen your ways through my eyes by reading the words. I will have heard them through my ears by listening to myself read out loud or somebody else read out loud. Of course, in his case, he's hearing God's voice for real. And I'll perceive you. I'll understand you in my mind. I'll know you by touch. I'll know you by the smell, by the scent. All of these things come to life as you read this book. Well, how's that possible, Rob? You're supposed to have bread. When you have your service, there's supposed to be bread there. If you come to my house, you smell the bread. There's supposed to be incense. If you come to my house, you'll smell the incense. So you follow what I'm saying? You come to our synagogue, that's going to be part of the experience. You're smelling it. You're eating the Passover lamb, the Passover meal. You're tasting it. All of this is part of it. It's supposed to be a hands-on discovery. And this is exactly what's being talked about right here. All of this hands-on discovery. And this is lema'an, which is how we say because. Za. Because I will find, I will come to, I will attain to, I will have arrived at. We've already had that word. Remember? Chen. Grace. So if you really make me understand the Torah and I live it and I feel it and I hear it and I see it and I touch it and I taste it, then because I've done that, then I will attain to grace. Be'eneha, in your eyes. U're'eh, and look. It's to see, it's to behold with your eyeballs, right? Ki, which means because or for, amcha, your people. It's people you, but we say your people. Ha go'i, the nation, me, literally. So it's hazet, the this. It'll make sense. Here's the translation. And now, please, if grace is found for me in your eyes, make your ways known to me, please, and I will know you, because I will find grace in your eyes, and consider indeed this nation as your people. So we use the word for to see with the eyeballs is also to perceive with the mind. So he's saying, and consider, I don't remember seeing the word for behold. No, I threw that one in there. Sorry about that. So, and consider, he says, this nation as your people. This nation, Goim, Gentile, these Gentiles as your nation. Since God did not grant the last request based on the grace found in Moshe, he's a little more cautious with his request here. He's been a little more tentative with the way he's asking for grace. Cassuto argued that the word please does not express doubt, but has the signification of the word since. So every time he says please, let's put since in there. And now, since if grace is found for me in your eyes, make your ways known to me since, and I will know you. Okay, it don't work for me. We'd have to move some things around in the sentence to make it make sense his way. But I do agree with him. It isn't about doubt. But I don't know if the word since is what I would use. Of the words, and I will know you, Onkelos changed the words because he had a problem with the idea of men actually being able to know God. Even though the text has already told us that God spoke to Moshe like a man to his lover. Do you remember that? This is why I was so upset these last 2 weeks with Onkelos and the sages. The reason why the sages, when they're wrong, almost all of them are always wrong. It's because they're all reading Onkelos. Few of the sages, if any of them, actually spoke the Hebrew language. They knew enough about it to be dangerous, but that was about it. They spoke Aramaic, and since Onkelos did his work in Hebrew and in Aramaic, they're using his Aramaic to be able to make their commentary, right? It's very obvious that the commentary is based on the Aramaic because they make the same mistakes Onkelos makes. And they make mistakes because Onkelos is either added to the text or taken away from the text. He did it a lot. And it's one thing that the biblical text told us to never, ever do. But he did it. Why? Because Onkelos was a Hellenistic Jew. Hellenistic. And he converted, by the way, to Judaism. So he came up as a Hellenized thinker. He came up Western in his thought. Everything was literal. Everything. So when it talked about God having feelings, he had a problem with that because God was above feelings. When it talked about God having a hand, he had a problem with that because that was, in his mind, to bring God down to being nothing more than a man. And you know how I feel about that. If man has a hand, it's because God has a hand. If man has feelings, it's because God had feelings. We were created in his image and in his likeness. Now, we are no closer to God than our shadow is to us, right? I say that every time to make sure you guys know that I am not trying to bring God down to man's level or to bring man up to God's level. I will say that if God so chooses, he can bring himself down to man's level. But no matter what man does, no matter what man attains to, he will never be able to raise himself to God's level. The one thing that man can do is learn God's law and live according to God's lifestyle. But we can't be God. We can't be little gods like some people teach. But we can't live like God. And that's because God is gracious enough that he gave us his spirit. All right, verse 14. And he said, faces he go they, and make rest me to you. Uh-oh. Moshe said, if I found any grace, and God's not even going there. Just saying, just pointing it out. He will go there eventually, though. And he said, faces he go they. So faces is before. They will go before and make rest me to you. So it's vayomer. And he said, pane. That's the word for faces. And we use that of being in someone's presence, being before them, because in order for you to be before someone's face, you have to be in their presence, right? You have to be right. Well, these days we kind of have computers and cameras, and that's not really quite so true. But back then it was. I just thought of that. Yelehu. So it starts off, it's saying, and he said, and he's using the word for in the presence of or before. This is Yelehu. So they will go. They're going to go. They're going to walk on. They're going to walk on this journey. They're going to. Hopefully, this journey, this walk, will be according to the Torah, right? But they're going to go on this journey, and this word is indicates that there are boundaries, right? Because if you're on a path, it has boundaries. Even a little bitty cow path has boundaries, right? Because the path is only that wide, and then you got grass on each side. So there's boundaries there. Then it says Veha Nihoti. Well, this is I don't know if you caught it, but Noah, that's the root word here. It's in Hefil. It's to set down, to deposit anyone in any place, to let down one's hand, to lay a scourge on anyone, to deposit one's wrath, to satisfy it, to accomplish it on anyone. In Hefil, it's to set down, to lay down in any place, to cause to rest, which is sounds more like the root to me than Hefil, but this is the explanation for Hefil. To give rest to anyone, to let anyone rest, to leave, to cause anyone to remain anywhere, a people in a country, to leave remaining, to desert, to leave behind. That's kind of spooky. Then it says lach, to you. So your translation becomes, and he said, they will go away, and I will depart from you. I will make my rest of you. I will depart from you. It was idiomatic. So, and he said, they will, faces. In this case, I use the word away. They will go away, because it makes more sense in English. But because it's the negative article, the negative side of this word, you're going to be in the presence of, now you're going to not be in the presence of. It's the opposite. It's the negative. And every Hebrew word has that, right? Barak, to bless, is also to curse. It's the same way. If it's to be in the presence, it's also to not be in the presence. So God just said, and he said, they will go away, and I will make my rest of you. I will depart from you. That's pretty hardcore. Then Moshe is going to respond, of course, and he said to him, if none faces you, going not you shall make ascend us, make this, or from this. All right, so this is, of course, going to make some sense. Vayomer, and he said, Eliv, and he said to him, of course, he's speaking of God in the masculine, because in Hebrew, everything is spoken about in the masculine. It would actually not be wrong to say, and he spoke to her. Just saying. Some people can't wrap their mind around that, right? But it would have been correct. Anyway, im, there's your if, your conditional interrogative. So we say if. If ain, that's the word for emptiness, vacuity, not, no, nothing. It's the negative article. If not, panecha, faces you. See, we're back to that same thing. Remember, he used the negative of the present. So he's doing the same thing here. Well, if we're not going to be in your presence, if we're not going to be before your face, if we're not going to be in front of you, holchim, there's your word for going. That's the going on the walk, the boundaries, and all that stuff that we said a while ago. It's the same words. Then it's all, which is the word for not. Ta'alenu, you shall make ascend us. All right, so he's saying, look, if you're saying that we have to go away from your presence, then don't let us go up. Don't let us ascend from here, because where they're going from there is actually uphill. They're down in a low place, and they're going to go up to the high place, which is where Jerusalem is. So he's saying, look, don't let us go up, Mizeh, from this place. Let's just stay here. Look, if you don't want to go on this journey with us, then can we just stay here and stay in your presence? That's what's being said here. So the translation then is, and he, of course it's Moshe, said to him, God, if your presence is not going, do not make us ascend from this. From this. It doesn't say from here, it says from this. Remember what Moshe just is saying that he wants to happen here. I want to get to know you, blah, blah, blah. Don't make us ascend from this. Of those words, the Sepharno wrote that it was better to stay in the desert with God than to move on to the promised land without him. And I agree with that. But I think there's way more going on here. He's saying, if we can't be in your presence, if we can't learn about you and get to know you and have this relationship with you, because you're not leaving here, can we just stay here and let that happen? Verse 16. And in what he know, wherefore find me grace and eyes you, I and people you, not in going you with us, and we will be separate us, I and people you, from all the people that upon faces the ground. That's a little tougher, right? Uvame. And in what? And to what? You could say it that way. Yivada. And to what will it be known? Will it be seen? To what? I don't know. I'm wanting to say to what. What will it come to? Maybe we could say here, but how will it be? How will it be perceived? How will the knowledge be acquired? How will the seeing, the perceiving, the touching, and all of that stuff? What is that going to come to? Etho, which is your question. That's how you ask a question in Hebrew. Ki, which is for because. Matzati, find me. It's to come to attain, to arrive. It's that word. Chen, and there's your word for grace. Be'enecha, in eyes used. So it's the grace in your eyes. And this is ani be'amecha, I and these people that are belong to you and your people. Halo, which really is that not. Be'lechtecha. And that's the going, the walk, the living out, the lifestyle of God, if you will. Imanu, with us, if you're not going to go with us. Benif lenu, and we will be separate. And they say it's to separate, to distinguish. Separate is a good word. Ani ve'amcha, and people you. So it's getting a little convoluted here. Mikol, from all ha'am, all the people. So we're going to be separate from all the people asher that all are upon Pene, the faces, ha'adama, of the ground. You could say of the earth if you like, but that's actually the word for ground. So your translation is this. It'll clear it up. And in what is it known then that I have found grace in your eyes, I and your people? Because see, now we're back to, okay, so I get it. There's no grace in your eyes for me. So now he's jumping back to grace in the eyes of the people, or the people have found grace in your eyes. And in what is it known then that I have found grace in your eyes, I and your people? Is it that, okay, how can anyone know that these people have found grace in your eyes if you don't go with us? This one was a difficult one to write out to where it made sense. I and your people. Is it that, oh, okay, is for that. So I and your people, is it not in you going with us? Okay, I got it. Sorry, I got a little tripped up on how I wrote that. And in what is it known? How is it known? How is the world going to know that I have found grace in your eyes? Oh, I and your people. Is it not in you going with us? How are they going to know that we've found grace in your eyes if you're not with us? So isn't it you going with us that shows the world that we've found grace in your eyes? And then he goes on and says, and we will be separate, I and your people, from all the people that are on the earth, that are on the faces of the ground. We will be separate. Oh, he's making a whopper of a promise here. I'm just saying, he's throwing it out there. We will be. So he's trying to tell God, again, he's worried about what the neighbors think. You remember that? Oh, Lord, what's the neighbors going to think now? He's worried. How are they going to know that we found grace in your eyes if you're not with us? I'm kind of with him on this one. That seems like a good argument to me. Of those words, is it not in you going with us? So Sephorno wrote that the other nations would see Yisrael as a great nation only if God was actually with them. And at first I was kind of like, not really. That's just kind of out there. They're trying to build up Yisrael as something special. But the truth is, they can't be a special nation if God's not with them. So it is a correct statement. I agree with it. All right, verse 17. And he said, Yahweh to Moshe, also the word of this that spoke you, I will do for found you grace in eyes mine, and I will know you in name. Oh, this is incredible, people. This one makes the tears start to flow if you're not careful. Vayomer, and he said, Yahweh. So, and as we would say it, Yahweh said, El Moshe, to Moses. Gam, which is also in addition to yea, indeed, truly, could be truly. Et hadavar, the word, the speech, the discourse, the promise, something that was said. Hazeh, so this word, asher, that divata, that you spoke. You ranged it in a row. You've said, if you don't go with us, how will the world know that I and your people have found grace? And God is saying that word, Eseh, I will do. I'm going to make it happen. What's he saying? He's saying, I'm going to go with you. Ki matzatah, for You've found, you've obtained, you've come to, you've achieved chen, grace. Be'ena, in my eyes. Be'eda'aha, and I will know you. Remember, God already knows him. Again, God's making it about the people and not about Moshe. Moshe kept trying to throw himself in the mix, and he just couldn't get there. So when he's talking about the you, the children of Israel found grace in God's eyes. And then he says, I will know them b'shem. I will know them by name. They're going to get to know that Torah. They're going to get to know God in every way possible. They're going to know how he thinks, how he feels, what he believes, because this group of people are going to get to know the Torah. Is it this particular group? Not really. But it is the children of Yisrael. The children of Yisrael, they're not born of a bloodline. This is a religion. And these children are the ones who follow God's law, the ones who take the time to get to know him by sight, by sound, by word, by touch. Those are the children of Yisrael, and God is going to walk with them. The translation, and Yahweh also said to Moshe, this word that you spoke, I will do for you, Moshe, and the people, of course. For you, it's really more about the people than Moshe. I'm not even sure it's about Moshe at all, to tell you the truth. For you, the people, have found grace in my eyes, and I will know you by name. So he is talking about the people. We know that God is speaking of the people here because God already knows Moses by name. Of the words, I will do, Haskuni said that it means that God was going to show us his ways. Of course, he's referring to verse 13. I'm in agreement with that because it's essentially what Moshe is saying. He's saying, if you will make me understand the Torah, then I will know your ways and I will find grace. Because he's putting it in singular terms. In verse 18, it says, and he said, see me now, glory you. This is a whopper of a request. Vayomer, and he said, har eni, see me. So it's to see, it's that to acquire the knowledge, the getting to know someone and the perceiving. And this is so do it now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to get to know you over a long period of time. I want to know it right now. Et kevocha, your glory. And that's that heaviness, that glory of God, his majesty. Boy, if it came down on you, it would crush you like a bug. And he, Moshe, said, show me that's weird. I wrote that one out bad. Show me your glory, please. Gasuda wrote that, please show me your glory means grant me, pray, the privilege that thy manifesting thyself to me. The signification of the word glory in this verse as above in 16:7 and 16:10 and 24:16 and several other Pentateuchal passages is theophany. So he felt that Moshe was saying, I want to see your actual body. I want to see you, if you will, face to face in the physical. Rashbam wrote that it was impossible to think that Moses was asking to see the invisible God. Based on what I do not know, he felt that Moshe was asking God to make a new covenant with him like the one he made with Abraham. No. Even Ezra wrote that your glory denotes God, not someone sent in his place. Obviously something that was an issue in his time. Probably not an issue in ours. I wonder if I'd be pushing it. Yeah, I can do this. How many verses are there in this chapter? Can you see the top up there?
They go to 23. It goes to 23. I'm afraid that Google's going to cut you off.
Okay. We probably better, Google's got this thing where they're cutting us off now, so we probably better stop here for the day, for the week, and we'll pick up with where God's actually going to present himself to Moshe. All right. Shalom, shalom, y'all.